It's easy to think that monopolies are just something from economics textbooks or dusty business seminars. But monopolisation is more than that. For one thing, a monopoly within an industry doesn't necessarily mean that the sector spotlight is hogged by just one company. It often means that a small handful of companies exert a dominance over the industry. Against that background, a monopoly acts like a very slow form of erosion. It chips away at everything good that the industry once had. It's like this creeping fog that rolls in, covering every corner, and before you know it, you're left with something cold, impersonal, and unrecognizable. When one or more companies dominates an industry, it may seem efficient at first. You get economies of scale, they say. One or two big companies means more streamlined processes, right? But that is a facade. Beneath that, the roots are rotting. See, once a monopoly is in place, the industry doesn't need to fight for quality or innovation. It's like there's no one left to compete with. The pressure to be better, the drive to improve, these things fall away when you're the only game in town. Quality starts to nosedive, often in these subtle, almost invisible ways. Prices edge up slowly but surely because there's no incentive to keep them competitive. Why would they? You're the only option, so you'll pay what they charge. But you know what's worse than the prices or even quality? It's the stifling of ideas. The newcomers, the dreamers, the underdogs who have these fresh perspectives, they get locked out. Monopolies hate competition. They hate risk too. So they build these walls, barriers that block anyone who might dare to disrupt the status quo. Sometimes it's the high startup costs or the legal hoops they're forced to jump through, which often they can't afford. Sometimes it's just downright ugly tactics, lawsuits, restrictive practices, exclusive contracts. For the workers, it's even more grim. When there's only a handful of big players, employment choices shrink dramatically. The power balance tilts entirely to the employer's side. Wages stagnate because where else are you going to go? Job security becomes an illusion. Benefits shrink, workloads rise, and the culture becomes impersonal and indifferent. And worst of all, there's no accountability. In a competitive industry, if one company mistreats its workers, people can leave for a rival. But in a monopolised field, that option disappears, trapping workers in an unhealthy cycle. And what happens to the innovators? They're left on the sidelines watching their vision fade. It's tragic because these people would otherwise bring new life into the industry. Think about it. Newcomers are generally hungry. They're determined, willing to take risks and push boundaries. They're not weighed down by the way we've always done things. They're the ones who think, why not try this? Why not make things better, cheaper, faster? But under monopoly conditions, those voices go unheard, and their potential dies quietly in the dark. And the biggest irony of that is those that now sit atop an industry sector often started as the disruptors themselves. They grew by shaking things up, by being daring and innovative. But once they'd established dominance, they became the exact thing they once opposed. They stopped taking risks, stopped pushing boundaries. Innovation becomes a buzzword, not an actual practice. So the industry stagnates, bogged down by outdated processes and services that haven't really evolved in years. Any real progress becomes the stuff of press releases and marketing spin rather than actual, tangible improvements. When just a few companies dominate the market, those industries lose any meaningful collaboration and cross-pollination of ideas. If a monopolized industry has too much say in its sector, it can start influencing policies and regulations. And when regulations are crafted with just one or two companies' interests in mind, it chokes innovation across the board. Barriers go up, not just to block competitors, but to reshape entire markets in ways that only serve the monopoly's interests. Everyone else is left scrambling just to keep up. Now, I get it. Monopolies don't spring up overnight. And to be fair, they're not always this evil entity lurking in the shadows. Sometimes it's just a matter of circumstances. Maybe they had the right product or service at the right time. Maybe they genuinely innovated. But once they reach the top, that focus changes. Instead of innovating, they start preserving, building walls around their territory. And then they start lobbying, pressing policymakers to create regulations that favour them and keep competitors out. It's a sad and bitter irony, though, because the very thing that made the industry dynamic, exciting, and full of potential is killed off by monopolisation. When you kill competition, you kill the energy, the drive, and the momentum. All the little companies, the startups and their bright-eyed founders and their audacious dreams, they wither before they've even had a chance to grow. And without them, the industry grows stale, complacent, and lifeless. Monopolies don't just damage the industry they dominate, they damage the entire ecosystem around them. They damage the lives of their workers, the experiences of their customers, and the fabric of the sector they're supposed to serve. When an industry becomes monopolized and raises walls to block newcomers, it creates a culture of good enough and of stagnation. And once that fog of monopolization settles in, it's hard to see just how vibrant, dynamic, and truly human the industry once was.